Welcome to the Teachable Moment series. I'm Pastor Darrell here at Reconciled Church, Los Angeles. I have a question for you as we springboard into today's Teachable Moment. How do you feel about uninvited guests? Folks who just show up at your house like they RSVP. Are you a gracious host inviting them in even though you'd rather not? Or are you the kind of person who sees them walking up or hears them knocking at the door and you pretend not to be home? Do you hide in your own house? In the passage we'll consider today, Jesus has been invited to a meal at the home of a Pharisee. This meal is fascinating because an uninvited guest interrupts and hijacks the mealtime. The interaction that ensues is worth our consideration, so let's begin. The story actually begins in Luke chapter 7, verse 36. It says this: Then one of the Pharisees invited him, Jesus, to eat with him. He entered the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. And a woman in the town who was a sinner found out that Jesus was reclining at the table in the Pharisee's house. She brought an alabaster jar of perfume and stood behind him at his feet, weeping, and began to wash his feet with her tears. She wiped his feet with her hair, kissing them and anointing them with the perfume. Luke provides a few details to help us understand the context of this meal. First, as I mentioned, Jesus has been invited to possibly a Sabbath meal after having just taught, worshiped, and or fellowshipped at a local synagogue. The host is a Pharisee named Simon. We'll learn his name next time in the next episode. Pharisees were a sectarian group amongst the Jewish religious leadership. They were experts in the Hebrew Bible. As such, they were infamous for pointing out the do's and don'ts of the Hebrew Bible, but they oftentimes found loopholes that exempted them from obeying the same requirements. You can imagine this type of hypocrisy didn't endear them to the Jewish people. Nevertheless, Jesus attends the meal. He, along with the other invited guests, are reclining at a table, enjoying their meal and conversation. Remember, they're laying on cushions or pillows with their heads closest to the table and their feet are behind them. This is the way meals were conducted in the ancient world. When all of a sudden an uninvited guest enters the room, and this is not just any invited guest. Verse 37 says that this guest is a woman, and not just any woman, but she is a sinner. Perhaps she is a prostitute or an adulteress. Whatever her immoral lifestyle, she is a well-known sinner. How do we know? Because Luke says she is a sinner in verse 37. Simon affirms that she is a sinner in verse 39. And Jesus not only confirms that she is a sinner, but he says that her sins are great in nature or number in verse 47. This woman is a nefarious, notorious sinner. The woman, hearing that Jesus is having a meal in this home, seizes her opportunity to show gratitude to Jesus for having forgiven her sins at a previous encounter that is unknown to us. When she arrives, she positions herself behind Jesus at his feet. She is overcome with emotion and begins to cry tears onto the feet of Jesus. With no towel to wipe the tears from his feet, she opts to let her long hair down to wipe the feet of Jesus. A woman letting her hair down in public was culturally frowned upon, but this shows how desperate she is to show the proper appreciation for what Jesus has done for her. As she dries his feet, she begins kissing his feet, and finally, because she cannot access his head, in order to anoint his head with the expensive perfume she brought with her, she instead lathers his feet. The acts that the woman performs on Jesus can be characterized by humility, hospitality, and honor. In verse 39, Simon the host is appalled that his meal with honored guests has turned into a shameful debacle. However, Simon is not frustrated with the woman per se. He's disillusioned and convinced that Jesus is not who people said he was or who Jesus himself claimed to be. The text says in verse 39, when the Pharisee who invited him saw this, he said to himself, "This man, if he were a prophet, would know who and what kind of woman this is who is touching him. She is a sinner." Simon finds two reasons to disqualify Jesus from being a prophet sent by God. First, if Jesus were a prophet, he would know that this woman is a nefarious, notorious sinner, and he obviously doesn't know that. Second, if Jesus knew that she was a sensational sinner, he would certainly not allow her to touch him. In Simon's mind, Jesus failed both tests. Therefore, Jesus is an imposter. In our next episode, we will see how Jesus responds to Simon's conclusions about him and the woman. Take care.